Welcome back from lunch, and I think this is a good challenge for me to show you what I'm going to be telling you, because it's a hard time to get students, children, or an audience to be really alert and attentive when they've come back from a meal or a break. So let's see if I can show you and do it at the same time. You'll need at some point something to write on and something to write with. So it can be a computer, but at some point you're going to write something down and hold it up. I won't really see it, but I'll model something. Neuroscience from lab to classroom. Attention, which is our focus now, the information comes because of neuroimaging that we can see metabolically because of that high metabolic activity in parts of the brain, what part of the brain is particularly active. And through association, if a part of the brain is active, that means that the activity, something is happening there. The neurons are alert, alive, processing. So that most of the information that we know about what gets through attention, what makes it up around the brain, is because of studies on humans in the lab, which does not necessarily guarantee that it proves anything for a classroom or kids at home, but it correlates. So I'll show you what the correlations suggest about how the brain pays attention, what gets through an involuntary attention filter, and how we can help increase attention through various strategies that do affect the flow of information through this filter. Now, the filter is pretty far away from where information needs to go. Information needs to reach the prefrontal cortex under the forehead if it's ever going to become memory. That's the only place where the brain turns new sensory information into memory. And information comes in through the senses, not where you think it is, not like behind the eyes or next to the ears, but way down through the bottom, at the bottom of the brain, almost near the spinal cord, is this involuntary filter that determines what gets in. But let me show you first. Learning begins with sensory information. Let me show you how I think you'll feel that attention is a process of selection that is involuntary and affects what you're aware of, and therefore what can become memory. So let's see what your attention filters do. In this is a little 20-second clip. I'd like you to watch the team, the three players with the basketball who are wearing white t-shirts. And you're going to count the number of times that the basketball is passed among the three of them. Don't worry about the others. They're going to pass it around their own. So just these three players bounce, pass, or throw. Count the number of times they do it in a 20-second clip. Okay, now, what side of the screen, point to the side where the gorilla entered. Let's see. Let me see it again, and we'll see if you're right. Because I don't think I saw a gorilla. So, it was there. Some of you attended to it, some of you didn't. It wasn't a conscious choice. That's the involuntary filter. You don't see, you don't remember, you don't process what this filter doesn't let in. So let's try another one that's not moving. Count the number of times the letter F appears in the following slide. You'll have enough time to do it twice even. Okay. 6 times. Many of you didn't see it because you didn't attend, your brain didn't let in all of the F's on the ofs. So, okay, this was easy stuff for scanning neuroimaging to find out what doesn't get in, and that it is kind of involuntary. But how it works and how we can therefore make sure certain things get in, that was more research. So here's the deal. Millions of sensory bits of information are available to the brain every second. from all the senses and ones that we don't think of, because every little millimeter, square millimeter of skin, for example, has 5 different sensory receptors for vibration, light touch, firm touch, pain, and temperature and vibration. So much coming in, and that's not even the internal organs. So there's so much available, that's my mic, so much available, and yet the brain can only process, and the prime directive of this filter is to only allow in 2,000 bits of sensory information, approximately. And so it needs to be involuntary, because certainly you can't alert to which 2,000 out of these millions you want every second. So what is it? How does this very primitive organ determine what gets in? Because indeed, in humans, there hasn't been much change at all in this low brain structure. It's still under the same prime directives as it is in the other mammals. And it's programmed, its prime directive is based on survival value. And how does survival value get interpreted without using the higher brain? Simply, the prime directive is novelty. What's new, what's changed, what's different. Because the big threat to survival of animals in the wild are changes in their environment. So the system developed that if something is new, different, or changed, that's going to get priority for attentive intake. Great if you're living in the wild and want survival. More problematic if we have words, we have voice, we have things to be learned, and it's more of a challenge. So what works, and what is the deal with students not paying attention? The brain, or children, or husband, or wife, or anybody that you think should pay attention to you. Well, basically, the brain is, during consciousness, always paying attention. It's letting in its 2,000 bits every second. But they're paying attention, and so attention is letting in the 2,000 bits. But the person who's not heeding you, they're just not always attending to the sensory input that you're providing and you would expect or hope that they would be letting in. So students in the classroom, kids, people in your house, they're always paying attention, unless, as I said, they're unconscious. But what you think should be attended to is not what is being selected by this involuntary filter looking for novelty or change. So that's why, one of the 2 reasons why I left my neurology practice to become a teacher, to get my training and become a teacher, because I was getting so many referrals about 12 years ago from teachers who felt that kids had attention disorders. But it really was a big jump, specifically at that time, 12 years ago. And I hadn't been following the changes in education. But since I was getting a real increase in these kids to evaluate, and yet there was no higher incidence in kids who really had attention disorders, and they were coming from teachers, that's why I looked to the classroom, what's happening there. And I found out, and it's universal, the problem that's happening there that was affecting. And I thought, okay, if I became a teacher, I could use what I know about the brain and how it processes information, and maybe 30 kids a year I could change things for. I never expected to be here, write books, or give lectures, but when I applied my interpretation of neuroscience to the classroom, good things happened. But the problem is with us and growing. The problem in the classrooms, it wasn't the teachers, because they were the same teachers that were doing fine, but overstuffed curriculum. And it's unrealistic, and the response to too much that has to be, is mandated to be taught each year, the response, understandably, is more directed instruction. I totally understood. I knew that would be probably what I'd be mandated to do as a teacher. My plan was that once I got the classroom and the door was closed, I would use what I know about memory to nail that part. I knew my students would memorize what they had to in less time, because they would use things that I recommend, that I know about how the brain holds on to and makes memory stay. So right from day one, I'd bring back the things that good teachers have been using all along: the beans growing in the window, hatching of chicks, the group work, the glitter, the fun stuff, because I was predicting that the memory part would respond to other interventions, so I wouldn't be using directed instruction. But I really had an advantage. I had a fallback job. It's not too scary to think, oh, I might get fired if I have neurology to go back to. But here's what indeed is or was happening. The brain is looking to attend to, is directed to attend to what's new, what's different, what's changed. Novelty, curiosity. That's what's directed. That's how it's set. So it's unlikely to select out of the millions of bits something that seems repetitive, that's not personally relevant, that's boring, that is too difficult. Those aren't going to rank high with other changes in the environment, including a fly landing on your desk. So what can be done when there's information to be learned that isn't always exciting, relevant, and sometimes is too easy for some kids and too difficult and frustrating for others? Well, among other things, let's at least get it through the attention filter, and let's think about how to sustain attention. The other ones, you can go to my website and read all the articles you want. How to make memory stick and how to get the emotional state for learning. But today, what do we do to get it in and to keep attention? Well, let's go with what animals attend to, what other mammals attend to, and bring them into the classroom. The brain alerts to what's changed, what's different. Animals and humans, change of sound. That would mean for us a change of volume, pitch, cadence of our voices, changes in color. Movement alerts gets in, placement of objects that are in new places, the appearance, someone who's expected to look one way, looking another way, and things that arouse curiosity in general. So because the brain is programmed for what's new, what's different, if something is changed, that will, for a brief time, alert their attention. So we can start the attention alerting to a situation at school with some of these, and I'll give you some examples. Here's an easy one. But what else? Because if you're a teacher, let's say if you're a teacher in the classroom, there is no time for preparation like that. So the things I'm going to suggest, take no prep or planning except reading some of your emails that say, here are cool pictures or videos, and I'll show you. So for example, no prep or planning, how do you alert attention? Well, one way, you can captivate attention, you can captivate the attentive input through the filter with a suspenseful pause, because silence is novel. You can do it with clues. For example, once you have attention, and I'll show you how to sustain it, but once you have it, sometimes you really want to say, this is particularly important, or this is really, really, really important. For whatever reason, how can you, knowing that nothing will get in this filter, if it's not going to get in the filter of that fox. So basically, saying pay attention or pay extra attention to students doesn't have any more value than saying it to the fox. That's how our intake system works. So if words won't work, I started using clues with the things on the list that do work. Color, movement, curiosity, change. So I have two that I'll show you. And this is one throughout the year. If I wanted to say something is important, pay attention, I would use the colors of the stoplight and use both systems. So first I'll show you the hat, which doesn't involve spotlight. If I wanted, and they knew what the clues meant. If it was important, I just put on the hat. So there's movement, there's change, I'm wearing something different. It's like saying pay attention. They also knew if I put it on this way or moved it, it was a little higher on the traffic light. It was like medium importance. And as you can figure out, if I put it on this way, it's higher importance, and super important, flip the brim. So one system, and the other one, just for curiosity and the opportunity to do something different, I would use the color marker system. They or I could not use the colors of the stoplight, green, yellow, red, to take notes or write anything on the board. I couldn't use it, they couldn't. Except if I wanted to say pay attention, I would make a production out of getting my green marker, and they could use their green pencil that they had. They had the green, yellow, and red pencils, but they couldn't use them unless I did. So if something was important, I wrote it in green, they could write it in green. And if it was more important, yellow, and then up to red. So without saying pay attention, those were the cues that they would respond to that had the novelty, the color, the change. And it was really helpful. But curiosity and intake is not enough to sustain attention. What's going to keep them paying attention? That's the prediction part. Because the brain, as I'll show you, needs to know if its predictions are right. So get out your writing implement or cell phone, because this will only work for you to experience the power of prediction if you actually do it. So, and it's independent work. You'll have about 30 seconds to make to answer the question, and the second, well, I'll show you. First, it's going to be, you're going to write down 2 things. The only votes that'll count, the only bets that'll make it into the bookie, will have 2 things on the paper. How much, what would you prefer at the end of the month to get the amount of money if on day 1 it was 1 cent, but each day the amount was doubled? And the other option is at the end of 30 days, $100,000. So, right, you would write either of those, but to make your vote count, your bet count, the other thing you're going to write down is your estimate for the people or for yourself, whoever, doesn't matter if you choose it, but how much do you think there'd be at the end of 30 days or doubling? So when you have both of those things written down, the cent sign or the dollar sign, and a number of your estimate that there'd be after 30 days of doubling, make your prediction, make your bet, do its magic by holding it up. I won't really see it, but I'll acknowledge parts of the room when I see some movement and put it down. Yeah, good? I love it. More and more technos. Oh yes, they're coming in. Keep them coming. Got those? See it? Got it? There's a reason why I call these bets and predictions rather than answers. And that's the power of prediction, but I'll go into that another time. Right now, let's talk about some chemistry equations. Unless you want to know the answer to the money question. Now, think about it. You know I'm not really giving you the money, and it's exponential math, which some of you don't find particularly exciting, yet you really want to know. So I will show you that it's over $5 million. But the reason you won, no matter what you predicted, is you experienced the brain, the power you have when you give someone the opportunity to make a prediction. That's what sustains attention. And it's because of the same neurochemical brain transmitter that goes up during video game play and other things. Dopamine goes up by various stimulants, and especially making a prediction. Let me show you with the little dopamine detour. It's one of those neurotransmitters. There are 200 in the brain, and it's best known for what it does at the synapses. But let's talk about what happens when there's increased release and what makes it released. When dopamine levels are increased in the brain beyond just doing their job, you get some pretty good things: curiosity, pleasure, attention, motivation. And dopamine boosters that I'm comfortable with in neuroscience: movement, being read to, enjoying music, choices, interacting with peers, optimism. But the biggest boosters, most powerful stimulators, it's what we call intrinsic satisfaction. But the chemical behind it is dopamine, from making correct predictions and finding out that they're correct and achieving challenges. 2 things that video games have down, but we can do in the classroom. So the brain seeks patterns and pleasure. Dopamine pleasure comes highly from making a prediction that's right. So the brain is willing to make predictions that are wrong. I mean, people who make bets sorry. Okay, so people, golfers who keep going back despite failure, and people who bet money, and all of us, we make predictions knowing they may not be right, but we like the feeling when they are right. So the brain makes predictions. So if you start with curiosity, that thing that when they walk in a room is cool and curious, and they know it's going to relate to a prediction opportunity, now you have sustained attention. Okay, so when the brain makes a prediction, a bet, it wants to know if it's right. not because it wants to learn things, but because only when it gets the feedback that it's right, does the dopamine get released, and it feel this really deep pleasure satisfaction. So the novelty gets them in the room and attentive, knowing that that's going to relate to the information and they're going to make predictions keeps their interest up. So the brain attends to the curiosity, and then the buy-in, the predictions, is that every student has an individual response device, such as a whiteboard or a little magic pad. They simply write down, you ask questions, why do you think that curious thing is there? And everyone holds it up the way you did. Now the class becomes a chance to keep predicting and find out. The brain will keep paying attention as long as it knows the student knows that they get to revise. So throughout the class, if they know, predict any time during the class that you see a connection between that cool thing and what we're teaching. So the brain is alerting to the possibility of getting a prediction right. So you can start with those videos I told you to save, a cool video, an unusual object, a song, and throughout the class, they get to hold up. You have everyone do it once or twice, but anytime they see a connection, they hold it up. Then the class becomes a chance to get that increased dopamine throughout. So you can use curious pictures. You can walk backwards, and they can predict why you're walking backwards, perhaps because you're doing negative numbers, or going back in history. You can put up a video that's really cool and preempts the question, why do we have to know this? Because there's no reason why they have to know all of that. But I showed them a cool video that peripherally relates to the topic. The last thing I taught was 7th grade math. And they listen to the math because they're really curious about why that video's there. So here's one of the ones I'll show. Someone had to do the math. So you felt the power of curiosity. You felt the involuntary intake filter allow students through novelty, curiosity, and prediction throughout the lesson to be engaged because their brain, again, not because it really wants to know and be smart, but because it wants the pleasure of dopamine from a good prediction. So the brain wants to know what they have to learn. It's a really nice place to be. And feel free to email me if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, or to go on the website for links to a lot more prediction curiosity strategies. Thank you.